welcome to the webinar that we have on product market fit, finding product market fit fast. This is actually the second webinar in a series of webinars that we're going to do with Biner Startup Partner on Startup Your Startup Journey. So this year, we're really focusing on helping startups get started in on that journey. My name is Marie Bredberg, and I'm joined today by Karl Sjöblom.
Yeah. Hi there.
Yeah, and we're really happy to have Karl here. He is an experienced entrepreneur who's been involved in lots of startups. Do you want to talk a little bit about who you are?
I've been involved in a few startups. I've been mentoring a few startups, and I've been having startups as customers as well. And I've met entrepreneur colleagues all over Sweden and the world, actually. So, yeah,
great. Right. So I'm an investment manager with Biner Startup Partner, which belongs to Biner. And Biner is a consulting company that has a consulting part, an academy part, and a Biner Startup part. So that in that way, we focus on working with early stage startups. And today we're going to focus on finding product market fit fast. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to focus on Karl's journey with his startup, I Play Sports.
Yeah.
So we're really going to dive into what's involved in achieving product market fit. And if you have questions throughout, just post them. You can see the chat. We can see the chat. So I'll try to pick them up as they scroll down. So just write that in, and we'll try to answer those questions. So let's get started. We can pull up the presentation. We can go to the next slide. Right. So finding product market fit is such an important achievement. Actually, a lot of startups fail because they fail to find that product market fit.
Yeah.
So the real question is, how do you define it? How do you know when you've achieved product market fit? And I think one of the keys is that when you've achieved it. There's no question about it, but there are metrics that you can sort of measure. There are steps that you can take to ensure that you hit that finding product market fit. But how would you define it, Karl? What is it for you that really defines it?
Well, that of course is if the potential or the thought of users are starting to use it and are happy to talk about it to other users. So it grows that way, not by buying marketing, but users finding more users.
Yeah. I would actually say the same thing, that it's where your users actually become like your sales force.
Yeah.
They use your product and they like it so much that they actually go out and sell it for you. Another way to think about it is that you change the culture in a market, that you actually, once you introduce your product, it becomes so much a part of our daily lives or the user's daily life that if you were to take it away, they would not know what to do anymore. So that's an aspect of achieving product market fit. You can go on to the next slide. So for us at Biner Startup Partner, we really focus in on finding the market validation, validating the market and understanding the problem and your customers early. That's what we focus on in the discovery phase. And there are some steps that we take to achieve that. And one is having a clear problem statement and a solution. And the idea here is that if you can't clearly describe your product problem and solution, you probably need to work on it a little bit more. A good example that I just recently heard of was from the app Vivino. And their problem statement was, I don't know which wines are good or not. And their solution statement was to build an app that tells users which wines are good or not. Very simple, clear problem and solution statements.
Yeah.
And then they started off and went forth.
Love the app.
Yeah, me too. I use it a lot. having a clear target audience that you can talk to. So for us at Biner Startup Partner, we prefer to work with startups who are actually users of the product themselves, or a SME, but that's not a make or break situation. The key component here is that you can talk to your target audience, that you can go out, you can interview them, you can find out what their problems are, what their pain points are, and take that information back into your product development or design.
Yeah.
Yep. And then to validate the market and the problem, test it out, test out the problem and your solution. And then finally, we had this tagline to start, you've heard it said, start building and fail fast, but we believe that you should start engaging fast. Of course, you need to build and get your iterations out there, but the engagement is so important early on to achieve product market fit.
Definitely. If you do that, get that engagement early on, you would not have built anything that will have to be iterated to start with. It'll be pretty good when you're done with the first one.
Yeah, because you have a window of opportunity with your users.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that they feel engaged and that you design something that appeals to their needs and their pain points. Because one of the keys to product market fit is whether your users will buy it.
Yeah.
And users only buy a product that meets a need. So it's really important that you engage first. And then finally, to identify what metrics you use for success. How do you know when you've achieved some sort of product market fit? And usually that's through measuring usage and retention and understanding how your users share your product. So those are just some steps, some key points to achieving product market fit. We can go to the next one. I'll just quickly run through this. This is a sort of a phase or a process that we take our startups through when we partner with them, where we define the problem and we engage with customers. We define what that hypothesis is and how to test it, and then we make a decision on whether to build or not. But we can move to the next slide. Yeah. One of the strongest, or one of the most sort of key statements that I think of when I think of product market fit is the strongest user story is one where your user is becoming more of who they want to be by using your product. And I think of myself when I use Microsoft Teams nowadays with the COVID situation, that I use Microsoft Teams not because I think it's fun or engaging, but I use it because it makes me a better productive worker. Yeah. So when you're building a product, it's really important to find that red thread or that user story that your users are becoming more who they want to be. Just like Vivinino, it's like, I want to find a good wine, so I use this. It's not that the app is fun, it's that it's achieving a purpose for them.
Exactly. And unlucky that you needed COVID to find the use for Teams, but
yeah, exactly. But a lot of things came out of that. Yeah. We can go to the next slide. Let's skip over this one and go directly into some questions. So now I want to talk to you about your journey with iPlaySport.
Yeah.
If you can take us way back and sort of describe what that initial idea and concept was for your app, and how you took that idea to the market in the very early stages, to describe how you achieved eventually product market fit. But what is iPlaySport and how did you come up with that idea?
iPlaySport was a sort of LinkedIn for sports. And the idea came being a young athlete, and especially to my co-founder Per. He was actually a professional handball player, and the club that he played for went bankrupt. So then you skip down like 4 or 5 levels, which you don't want if you're on the highest level, being a professional handball player. he would like to be at the same level or not, or if not even better. So he was looking at finding a club to play for in Germany or Spain, where you can actually make some money compared to Sweden. But quickly realized that without an agent, without the network out there, it was pretty darn hard finding a new club to play for. So that's where it came from. And both me and David, our CTO, played football at a pretty high level. I've got a Swedish championship in rugby, actually. Small sport, but important nonetheless to have a Swedish championship medal. So it came from our actual own experiences that got us the idea, and we pretty soon knew that we were onto something. But then, of course, you need to validate that. And we did interviews with more than 300 professional handball and football players, both male and female. And I also added some golf pros, some hockey players, and some agents and coaches and of course, friends that were supposed to be fans in the platform. So early on, engaging with as many of the thought of stakeholders possible in the ecosystem for sports, asking them questions.
So if you could sort of very succinctly describe the problem and the solution that you thought would fulfill the problem, what would that be for I Play Sport?
I Play Sport would be, how do I get the most out of my career as an athlete? And that would be a platform where I could easily interact with the other stakeholders, where I actually own my own content. I decide who gets to see what. And we also made sure that we took the chance to say that it's enough now. Let's not be mean to each other or say bad stuff to people. So that was one.
Right. So you identified the concept. And you identified the problem and the solution. You yourself were a user of that eventual solution. You were a part of the target audience, which made it a lot easier in a way for you to sort of really hone in on what the problem is and if the solution would be attractive or not. Right. We can go to the next. Is there? Another slide. So now that you identified sort of the concept and the problem and what the solution could be, then you needed to go out and sort of engage with those different stakeholders. And you talked about doing surveys and things like that. At Biner, what we think a good engagement strategy entails is one where you actually capture the existing habits of those users. So you engage with them, you get to know them through face-to-face meetings, etc., and you sort of look at their behaviors. How are they trying to solve the problem today? And those sort of existing behaviors can become part of your eventual product design.
Definitely.
What were your users doing without your solution, without I Play Sport? What were they doing to sort of help advance their career as an athlete without this?
They were using all the other big social medias like Facebook and Instagram. Some were pretty early to adapt Snapchat, but I mean, none of them. LinkedIn for sure, but it's not built for an athlete. And they've got either on or off, like you've got a private account, then it's really hard to build your brand. And if you've got an open account, people will tell you that you've got fat thighs, curly hair, wrong color of your skin, whatever.
Right.
People
so they're mean. Exactly. And that doesn't really encourage you to be vulnerable and to go out there and sort of build your career.
You don't share your inner thoughts as an athlete because you know that people will pick on you. So some of them stopped using social media. Period.
So there was a gap in the market. There was a need to have a social media platform or some sort of platform where athletes could come together in a safe place and potentially talk to a recruiter or talk to someone who had an opening on their team and all that, so that they could easily flow in and out of the sports world.
Yeah, exactly. So once you made a post, by having started with 12 different user profiles like media, coaches, agents, clubs, athletes, fans, etc., you could choose who is going to see this post. Is it for everyone on iPlay or just agents? Because you don't want to tell the whole platform that you're looking to change clubs.
Yeah, of course you don't. Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. Okay, so now that you sort of know the concept, you know what the solution kind of looks like, you have this engagement strategy. Can go to the next slide. You talked about surveys, but can you go in a little bit in depth into engaging with your target audience and how they were working with social media, and basically from this, what happened, what elicits from this engagement strategy? Yeah,
sure. We, like I said, interviewed both male and female athletes, but also, like I said, other stakeholders in different ages, so that we could make an analysis of whether the needs change depending on where you're at in your career, which they not surprisingly do.
Right.
And of course, we also needed to stretch their imagination a little bit, like introducing a feature that we didn't think they would need, but potentially could need. It's like Henry Ford said, if he had asked people when he started building a car what they needed, they would have answered faster horses.
Right.
So he built a car.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to kind of like
be a visionary.
And challenge them a little bit as well. So then you know that, well, this is a feature that they could potentially be willing to use, but not until version 4 or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So already you're starting to take some of the inputs from engaging with your customers or your early users. You're already starting to take some of that and to define some sort of list of features. Right.
Absolutely.
So I think
they helped us prioritize the whole feature list that we had, which was a pretty extensive Excel sheet. And then we could also, together with the CTO, run through it and see, okay, so this is a wanted feature, but it's going to be way too expensive to fit in the MVP.
Right. Exactly.
So but we got a feature list with prioritized feature list, and then we cross match that with the technical challenges involved.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a really important point for everyone who's out there as an early stage startup, especially in the software space, is that you have a good idea, you have a set of features that you want to go with, you have those things that you love and you're passionate about. But it's so important to engage with your customers and engage with those customers who will be critical of you.
Yeah.
So don't ask your mother.
No.
There's a book about that.
She will always tell you that you can sing.
Exactly. Don't ask your best friends. Ask those early adapters who have no stake in the game.
Yeah.
They can go on living without what you have in mind. But once you show it to them, if they come back and say, oh, wow, that's amazing, I need that because what I do today is taking up so much of my time, then you know you've achieved something.
Yeah.
More engagement with them will help you to identify of that huge list, what do we start with?
Yeah, definitely. And there is actually a really good book out there called The Mom's Test. That you should read if you're thinking about product market fit and how to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know that engaging with customers can feel overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming to go out and talk to people. Just last week with one of our startups, we went out to the site of this customer and presented some wireframes and design and actually a prototype that we designed. And of course, it's a little bit awkward at first, but once you start getting into that, you get so much encouragement and strength and it's excitement. It becomes really fun that it's such a vital part. And there's another webinar that we can probably do in the future, but it's how those early customers, those first customers you talk to, end up becoming your first paying customers.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important.
And they're going to give you so much good input on things that you haven't thought of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole point of product market fit.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the next slide that we had? Right. So exactly what we were talking about, that a market-validated prioritized list emerges as you engage with your customers, and that you can't hop over.
No.
You know, if you do hop over that, if you go directly from sort of concept idea into design and build, you will miss out on those features you didn't think of.
Definitely. And you will have to scrap some of the features that you had in the MVP because they're not being used.
Yeah, exactly.
So
product market fit is actually all about the hustle. It's about getting out there, going to, working with your customers and really refining the feature list and knowing where to meet your first customers. Where do they look for new apps and new technology? How do they improve their business? And that's where you learn to meet them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And they have probably some sort of group, whether it's on another social media or whatever, where they meet, talk, interact, and you can spread the word. So, but you need to do it early on. So before starting to build something with just a mock-up or just a paper and pencil.
Yeah. So actually, I wanted to ask you about that. The next slide, I think we have that. Yeah. When you so you talked a little bit. We can have this question. You talked a little bit about how you defined your MVP.
Yeah.
And you went to your CTO and you sort of saw what was more expensive and things like that. Was there anything else you used to help identify the prioritized list?
Well, all the interviews, of course, because I think we had about 40 questions and they rated them from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And then we had to divide them into like professional athletes, younger athletes, and make sure that because the athlete was our number one user.
Yeah.
It was built for them. And the others should also be able to find features and functions that they needed, but the athlete was number one. So, and then we had like revenue streams, of course, thought of revenue streams to start with, and helping, or the athletes helped us defining the needs and how to prioritize them as well. Yeah. So
exactly, because you need to have features that also enable revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a balance.
It is.
It's who is your target audience, who are your early adapters, making sure that they love your first product.
Yep.
We like to call it MLP, minimal lovable product.
Yeah.
Which alludes the fact that what you put out there really meets the needs and the pain points of your customers. But then you also need to get some revenue.
Yeah, you do. So, and we had like 12 user types, and we did user stories for each type, and finding who should be the ones paying for this. Do they want to pay for it? So we needed to interview all the 12 user groups, and the thought was always that it was, at least for the bigger part of it, going to be free for the athletes. It was the sponsors and the Nikes and the Under Armours that was going to pay for it.
That was going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I wanted to also talk to you about now you've collected all this information, you've gone to the market, you've identified your early users, there's definitely a need. You have people sort of saying, okay, when can we use this? Mm-hmm. What did you do then? Did you build a prototype? Did you do wireframes? Did you go straight into an MVP? Because there's a lot of different approaches and thoughts about how much you should build at what stage.
Well, we did a mock-up. We went to investors and we raised our first million.
From a mock-up?
Yeah, from a mock-up.
Okay, just a mock-up. But did you have any letters of intent or customers saying that they would buy? I mean, how did you sell in a mock-up to get $1 million?
That's good at sales.
Yeah, okay,
no, but we had names that we could mention from athletes, of course, but we had no written letters of intent. And one of our first investors was another former professional handball player, which made it pretty obvious that if he was willing to invest, the users were going to use it. Mm-hmm. So we built the MVP, released it when there was the European Championship in handball in Poland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that leads to the last question then that I have there. How did you launch? And of course, that's pretty strategic to launch when there's a tournament.
Yeah.
So talk about that. So now you've built the MVP and you're going to launch, because that's a huge moment for a lot of people. Yeah. And I've heard different takes on it. Launch like Facebook did, where nobody even knows you exist, or launch with all kinds of media campaigns. So how did you guys launch?
What we did was that we started making with Adobe Photoshop. We made really nice pictures with professional handball players. I remember Mattias Andersson is a former goalkeeper in the Swedish national team. He was on a double-decker in London. We had Bella Guldén on a billboard with in the backdrop you had the skyline of New York City. And they posted on their existing social medias that follow me on iPlay Sport instead, because that's the platform for us who love sports. And all of a sudden people started to download the app. Okay. And then there was the championship, and we set up all night. We had calls from Spanish players in the national team of Spain. I want to use a profile on iPlay, because back then there were only fans that could register themselves. Right. So we created the profiles for the pros. And after 2 weeks of European Championship, we had users in 25 countries, and we seemed to have product market fit.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. There's more to the story, for sure, which we will probably take in another webinar, but it's really a journey of probably a lot of startups, how you get started. And the journey is really important. And that's why we're trying to focus on your startup journey, because it's so important for the success of your startup to start up right.
Yeah.
To really have that market validation in place and the product market fit in place.
Definitely. And of course it helps if you have experienced the problem that you're solving firsthand yourself.
Exactly.
Otherwise you need to talk to more people than 300.
Right.
I'd say.
Yeah. And you know where to meet those people. If you've experienced it yourself, you know where to meet those people.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in different professional settings experience problems and that they have an idea. They know, okay, if I had this, it would solve my problem immediately. But we also talk about like established companies, larger, medium-sized companies who have an ecosystem of products, but maybe they have a new idea to innovate or to do something new. These steps apply equally to them as well. It's always important to go out and validate your product, talk to your customers. So we hope that the steps and the things that we talked about today can be applicable to startups and to any size company. Yep. Are there any questions from the market or from the audience? No? Henrik, you pulled out that book. Is that the book? We have that book. What is... Yeah. The mom test. It's in Swedish. Hur prata med kunder för att ta reda på om din affärs idé. You can recommend. Have you read this book? This one?
Not a one in Swedish, no. But it's, I've read the mom test, so it should just be translated to Swedish, I guess.
Yeah.
It's great. And the whole title itself pretty much says it all. You shouldn't ask mom if you're a good singer or if your product is good looking.
She's always going to say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything? I think that's it. That wraps it up.
I think that for product market fit, there's, like you said, tons of information or lessons learned to talk about. That's for another webinar.
And if you have an idea for a startup or a software idea or something that you want to seek validation for or get support for, please visit our website. We have a site on Biner Startup Partner, and we would love to hear from you and start the process. We have a coaching phase where we sort of meet with you and talk to you about your idea, and then we evaluate whether we should go through the next step and process. So please visit our website and send us your information or your ideas, and we would love to start to engage with you. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.